From the best in the world first popping up in a backstage Brock moment, to some of AEW's finest making some often forgotten first steps on eventual enemy territory. These are those wrestling debut showings that you likely didn't even realize were a thing. Gareth here from What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 top secret wrestling debuts that will blow your mind. Number 10, Joe Hendry is a Russian diplomat, 2014. Jumping back to a time before he became What Culture Pro Wrestling's WCPW champion, and eventually went on to make Impact Wrestling fans believe in him, Scottish standout Joe Hendry actually made an often overlooked appearance on WWE programming, opposite none other than then United States champion Rusev and his future wife Lana. In a moment that hasn't aged terribly well in the near decade since it arrived on the scene, Hendry took up the role of Russian diplomat on a special UK edition of Monday Night Raw in November 2014, noting how President Putin couldn't be more proud of the powerhouse before a shot of the Russian president popped up on the Titantron for a few awkward moments. And while this definitely sits as Hendry's forgotten debut in a speaking role on WWE TV, he did also rock up as a Rosebud in 2014 too. Number 9, CM Punk's first meeting with The Beast, 2003. Around 10 years before the eventual megastars would collide at SummerSlam 2013, a Beast incarnate came into contact with the future best in the world for the very first time on WWE TV. With CM Punk acting as a Ring of Honor rising star back in April 2003, those passionate supporters of the up-and-coming promotion would have likely lost their damn minds at the unexpected visual of a young chick magnet suddenly shaking hands with Brock Lesnar as the new WWE champion took a moment to chat with some fans backstage. And while Punk would also famously rock up in the middle of John Cena's WrestleMania 22 entrance a few years later, this much earlier unofficial SmackDown debut appearance is often forgotten about by even the most vocal Punk supporters. Also, if you look closely as Lesnar wanders past his future rival, another future Money in the Bank winner in Mr. Kennedy can be seen trying to get an autograph as well. And with Lesnar proceeding to steal Kennedy's pen before using it to sign a woman's chest, it's not hard to see why WWE have likely done everything in their power to bury this particular set of backstage debuts in the decades that followed. Number 8, Scorpio Sky's various cameos, 2012 and 2013. With much of the attention quite rightly being on the unexpectedly outstanding combination that was Daniel Bryan and Kane during their famous 2012 anger management segments, these early days of Team Hell No, also involving another future wrestling star hiding in plain sight, often slips through the cracks. Popping up in a number of said anger management classes as Harold, AEW's future TNT champion Scorpio Sky could be found sharing with Bryan and the rest of the group one week, before an intense big red machine eventually gripped him by the throat of course, and creating some new trust issues the next thanks to the team failing to catch the independent star. Interestingly, Sky would eventually note how he initially attempted to name himself Kobe with a Y, but one of the skit's directors soon decided that it was he who would be tormented as poor Harold throughout the meetings instead. A year or so on from those rage-filled set of segments, Sky also secretly showed up as a fireman on WWE television back in 2013, stepping into that role during Bray Wyatt and Kane's SummerSlam Ring of Fire match in what acted as the former's main roster in-ring debut as the Eater of Worlds. Number 7, Britt Baker was squashed by Nia Jax, 2016. It turns out that the main roster debut of WWE's then latest women's division Wrecking Ball in 2016 also brought with it the often forgotten sports entertainment arrival of one of their rivals' future top sensations. With Nia Jax taking to the Monday Night Raw squared circle to make an almighty impact on her first night as part of the Red roster that July, an unfortunate Britt Baker was offered up to the powerhouse as a piece of meat to be royally squashed as her main roster winning streak got underway. And after toying with the future AEW Women's World Champion, Jax would emphatically end Baker's WWE debut with a colossal leg drop for her first Raw victory. Elsewhere, Baker would also show up down in NXT a few years later, once again being bested by a WWE project in Shayna Baszler just a few months before joining up with Tony Khan's All Elite promotion, and eventually becoming one of the most entertaining and valuable names in the game. Baker was actually pretty close to signing with WWE back in 2016, but instead was told that it'd probably be wise for her to complete her stint in dental school before pursuing a full-time wrestling career with the company. What could have been, eh? Number 6, Chris Statlander was a Brooklyn Belle, 2019. Another future AEW Women's Division star who snuck onto WWE television in an appearance few would be quick to recall. The SmackDown Live after WrestleMania 35 also played host to Chris Statlander's Under the Radar Sports Entertainment debut. With the Iconics fresh off of a career highlight Women's Tag Team Championship victory at the Showcase of the Immortals, Billie Kay and Peyton Royce turned their attention to the apparently 45-0 undefeated record-holding duo of Kristen and Carissa, aka the Brooklyn Bells. And on top of Kristen actually going on to become an AEW regular, her fellow beaten belle Carissa would ultimately turn out to be none other than future NXT performer Elektra Lopez as well. Fancy that. This would eventually turn out to be Statlander's one and only WWE appearance to date, with the one-time alien officially becoming All Elite by the end of 2019. A WWE offer was actually reportedly on the table for the Brooklyn Belle before she put pen to paper with TK's promotion, however, but the star would later admit to having zero regrets about opting to join the AEW machine after this brief tag team WWE losing effort. Number 5, Roman Reigns Hall of Fame cameo 2007. When the subject of the head of the table's first real WWE appearance is thrown into the average wrestling conversation, most fans would understandably be quick to point to the likes of his main roster debut alongside The Shield, his initial NXT arrival as Roman Reigns in 2012, or perhaps even his FCW bow as Roman Leakey back in 2010. But in reality, the eventual face of the company's actual first showing on WWE TV came all the way back in 2007, with the future Tribal Chief making a blink and you'll miss it cameo midway through his father Seeker's WWE Hall of Fame induction speech. After the Wild Samoan took a second to acknowledge his kids, including a certain Joe watching on, the program cuts to a shot of Reigns alongside his family, with a smiling Mick Foley glancing over at the grey-suited lad who would ultimately become the biggest star in the business. Reigns hadn't even officially decided to pursue the life of a pro wrestler at this moment in time, but just over 15 years on from this moment of applause, the Bloodline leader now finds himself being acknowledged by the masses on a weekly basis. Number 4, Karrion Kross teamed with Darren Young 2015. The idea of making your first ever WWE appearance in a contest that doesn't actually even properly get underway may seem a little bit underwhelming, but it still beats getting utterly embarrassed in less than 2 minutes while still reigning as an all-conquering NXT champion, doesn't it? A solid 6 years before Karrion Kross was forced to eat one hell of an anticlimactic L during his first main roster appearance opposite Jeff Hardy under that particular moniker, the star then known as Kevin Kross joined forces with Darren Young on the February 15, 2015 edition of Raw to take on a recently called up Ascension. Sure enough, the bout was soon derailed by some pre-match brawling as Connor and Victor's assault on the thrown together unit soon set the stage for a primetime players reunion. Hilariously, Kross was dumped out of the scenario before even being announced or named by the commentary team, with the attention swiftly turning to Titus O'Neil's intervention as Kevin apparently just completely disappeared at ringside. The one-time black and gold bringer of doomsday will likely be hoping third time is most definitely the charm when it comes to main roster debuts, eh? Number 3, Keith Lee was battered by the McMahons 2009. Another future NXT champion who didn't exactly get off to the most memorable of WWE starts. The performer who would redefine the term limitless over the years actually first popped up on Monday Night Raw as little more than a large obstacle for his eventual bosses to overcome. In the lead up to Triple H and Randy Orton's then incoming WrestleMania 25 showdown over the WWE Championship, Papa H joined forces with Shane and Vince McMahon to take the fight to Orton, Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase Jr. This wasn't merely the moment that gifted fans with the sight of Vince standing like he'd just soiled himself on live television though. The brawl also came equipped with Keith Lee getting thumped a few times by both McMahon and Trips as the unit made their way through security and down the ramp. In fact, the one-time head of NXT would even go as far as to dump his future champ into the guardrail before locking onto his upcoming Mania opponent. And according to Lee himself, Vince's initial right hand was anything but work too, with the big man not actually needing to sell the fact he'd been legitimately jawed on the night. Number 2, Powerhouse Hobbs history with Mox 2018. Now, I'm not just going to sit here and tell you that Dean Ambrose's final few months as part of a routinely embarrassing WWE product were anything other than a waste of the freakishly talented workers' gifts. But there was the odd positive to be found within the dreadfulness. In particular, the fact that Jon Moxley's weird Bane gas mask detour actually paved the way for the first real mainstream appearance of a performer who would eventually end up joining him in AEW later down the road. As Powerhouse Hobbs would recall a few years after the fact, 2018 did very much see him lining up alongside Mox in a gas mask as he made his way down to the ring in full SWAT gear on December 3rd's edition of Raw. Both Mox and Hobbs would eventually compare stories about how hard it was to breathe in those hilariously awful masks upon popping up in AEW together a few years on. And despite also showing up in a WWE SmackDown Live dark match opposite Baron Corbin in 2016, this was his first major televised appearance, and it unfortunately came in the thick of one of the worst storylines in modern WWE history. Number 1, Jon Moxley was a Druid, 2006. And speaking of the eventual 3-time AEW World Champion and 1-time interim, Jon Moxley knows a thing or two about making his first appearance as a slightly hidden figure alongside a top WWE star. Not long on from showing up on the barely watched Velocity show for a tryout of sorts, Mox was gifted the chance to wander out onto the Royal Rumble stage with none other than The Undertaker at the 2006 edition of the event. Focus on the bottom left corner of the frame as the Phenom arrives on his entirely bizarre chariot, and you'll spot the eventual Shield star and WWE champion holding a flaming torch, with a look of "well, I didn't see this coming" slapped on his young mug. It'd be another 5 years or so before the soon-to-be Dean Ambrose would officially sign with the biggest promotion in town. But you gotta start somewhere, and holding the torch for one of the most successful performers ever to shoot lightning out of their gloved fingers isn't exactly the worst way to kick off one of the greatest careers of modern times. And that's our list of any other top secret wrestling debuts that will blow people's minds. Then let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and do not forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're at it. Also, if you like this kind of thing, then please head on over to whatculture.com and find some more fantastic articles just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Wrestling. Thank you as always for watching this lovely video today. Hopefully I'll see your faces very, very soon, but in the meantime, hey, just be good to yourself. Bye bye!